Forest Podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Looking for the best pool supplies? Look no further than Dohany's Pool Supplies. With a history dating back to 1967, this family-owned business offers everything families need to keep their pools clean and sparkling, from chemicals to equipment. Plus, customers enjoy free shipping on all orders. Visit Dohany's Pool Supplies today at doheny.com, DOHENY.com, to learn more. Forest Bluff Real Estate Team serves Illinois, Wisconsin, Lake Forest, and Lake Bluff. John Josephitis, Laura Lee Van Fleet, and of course Michelle Parnell. Get a free market analysis now at forestbluffrealestate.com. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Havey Communications has been helping first responders arrive safely since 1983. It's owned by Lake Forest's own Mike Havey. Check them out at haveycommunications.com. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters: Matt A., Elizabeth C., Costa, Lance, Otto, RDM, John C., and Helen. Shout out to the Lake Forest Breakfast Group, Broad Stop and Captain Mike's in Kenosha, the Greentown Tavern, and the Frolic Lounge in Waukegan. So if you had a magic wand, how do you fix it? Because there's people on both sides, because people are going to say, oh, you just want to get rid of the teachers. Oh, you just want to get... No, man, we just want good scores. We want to be market competitive.
Yeah. So like kind of within the confines of the current structure, and I think this is kind of what we're doing at Parents Care, is I really believe that like every community needs a kind of a watchdog group that creates a level of accountability you just don't find in these government institutions. Really big picture, if you're talking about like my idea of kind of a utopia is, you have to kind of break the current system apart and allow competition and choice. And I'm not just talking about like charter schools. I'm talking about like,
you're talking like vouchers or?
Yeah, I'd say kind of like a universal voucher system. I mean, I'd be in favor of supporting something, for example, where taxpayers subsidized the voucher end, and then you were able to use that in whatever school or district you wanted to, and perhaps you'd have, to encourage kind of competition on pricing, you'd have like a rollover into a college savings fund. But that's the way, if you think about the way most of us live our lives, it's in the private sector, it's in the private sphere, and it's usually where we're most happy. I mean, we don't complain about grocery stores to the same degree we do it with public education, partly because, I'd say mostly because we have a choice. They're within
vote with your feet.
One town. Yeah, we've got, just think about Lake Bluff, Lake Forest. You've got Fresh Market, you've got Jewel, you've got Walgreens, CVS, Heinen's, and the list goes on. Sunset Foods. So you've got all these choices, and they're in competition with each other. They don't just say, well, sorry, we're, if the food's going rotten, for example, they don't say we're gonna, send out an email to the community and we're gonna hold a committee on it, and in 3 years we're gonna, make sure that 70% of our food is fresh. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's a problem that's fixed the next day, or else you go out of business.
What is the what are both sides talking about on the voucher system? Like, why are so people against it? I know I would be for it. I guess you would be for it, but like, what is the argument? I'm trying to show both sides.
Hey, Pete, Pete, I think it's important to realize, for the first time ever in Illinois, the majority of Illinois citizens are in favor of school vouchers. Historically, historically people would look at the voucher system and say, well, it's complicated, it's hard to fathom. But schools have dipped to such a low watermark. According to a recent poll, I think it was 63% of even Chicagoans were in favor of school vouchers. And that's the degree to which these public institutions, these structures and bureaucracies we've set up, have failed the community. People are literally now, they're not okay anymore with 10% of African American kids being on grade level in math or English, or as a state, looking at 25% competency in certain areas. People are just saying enough is enough. And I don't even think it's a financial argument anymore. It's, the nonpartisan nature of the entire education question becomes what service have we rendered our children? Interesting point. School boards are down to about a fourth of what they were back in the 50s. Nationally, there's only about a quarter of the number of school boards that existed in the 1950s. I mean, parents, communities have, I don't want to say advocated because that's kind of a negative connotation, but we've developed this professional education class that does little other than to assure its own thriving. Frank, would you say that's true?
Yeah, I'd say, in terms of what is the argument against, I mean, it's primarily coming from teachers and administrators because they have a vested interest in the status quo. And the one thing I can say with absolute confidence, having worked in public education for over a decade, is if there's one kind of unifying rule between teachers and administrators and paraprofessionals and everyone in the system, is that they're all devoted to preserving the system, no matter the costs or consequences. So, they're of course they're gonna be against it, and I think they know the system's broken and dysfunctional. A lot of conversations I'd have with people, they got it. But what it comes down to is dishonesty. I think some of that is intentional. I think some of it is kind of delusion. They really want to believe that, one day the perfect public education will be fixed with, the right law or the right number of laws or policies, or if we just get more money. I mean, it's like really, it sounds like a ridiculous parallel, but, when you talk about, you look back in the history of the 20th century and communism, I'd say, well, communism didn't work here, and here. But if we just did this right, or if we had, if it was tried this way, or if people did this, that's all I heard, is that like, there was always some new magic formula that would fix everything. It's ridiculous to think so. And there's a lot of propaganda that's been put out by teachers unions and by school districts to convince the public that, there's no other way to do things than the way we've done them for 100 years. And the record's terrible. At what point do people wake up?
I hate pointing the finger without offering a solution. And I'm looking, look, I don't have any skin in the game, even though my taxes went up, and I'm pissed about that. I'm pissed because I helped get the taxes brought up by promoting an agenda, propaganda of Montgomery coming on the show. That's my personal beef. That's nobody else's. I call it how I see him. So now, okay, great. I get it. I see how this works. If there's 1,400 kids at the school, about 1,400, right? That's not a lot of people in the school. And if you don't like how the school is running and you had a voucher system, like, where would you go? New Trier? Like, what's the options?
I think what you'd see is, and there'd be kind of a process, but, right now it's hard to imagine what the system would look like, partially because we're living within the confines of the current structure. So, the example I use is if you went back to, the Soviet Union in the 1960s, and, you're going to the state grocery store, and someone says, well, if there wasn't a state grocery store, where would people go to get their food? There'd be do you see any other grocery stores around here? Well, yeah, if you look at it from that perspective within the confines of the current system, but we know that what happens is that when there's freedom in the marketplace, and there's kind of an influx of capital outside of just one channel, that we'd see lots of people would spring up to start creating schools. And I don't know how they look, because I'm not smart enough to kind of and that's kind of the point of mastermind a system. I don't think anyone is. I think a lot of people would come forward. Maybe there'd be pod systems. Maybe there'd be a combination of remote and in-person learning. And you probably wouldn't have these giant castle type school structures that, funnel everyone into a single system. And there wouldn't be a one size fits all model. It would be very diverse.
I believe your example of communism, I believe, and I'm sure somebody will point this out because we're touching on some interesting things here that is going to push somebody's buttons. But hey, whatever. In Russia, you want bread, you go to the bread store. You want meat, you go to the meat store. And the question is there inventory, on the shelves? You just see long lines and you don't know what they're for. Hey, what do they got there? And you stand in line. So maybe it would work where at Lake Forest High School, you got 1,400 kids going there. Maybe you don't offer the huge menu of classes, but you have the core basics there. And if you want to get something on the long tail, Irish American history or whatever the class is, maybe you could combine that at community college, another high school, and make things a little bit more efficient that way. That's my best guess on how to fix it.
You'd see a lot more efficiency. I mean, if you give, like, for example, you give a public school $30,000 per student per year, and they're never going to come back after a year and be like, well, too much money, we'll give some of it back. They're always going to find a need for a way to spend it. And they're always going to tell you like, hey, actually, it wasn't enough. It was barely, the best you're going to get is, well, we just made it, but we could always use more. And that's kind of the point. There's no incentive to return that money. There's no incentive to be competitive because they don't have to be. So if anything, they're incentivized to go over budget so they can come back the next year and continue to ask for more and more money, which is kind of why public education if you look at kind of the trajectory throughout the 20th century, I mean, it's just the growth has been exponential. But student scores are the same.
The budgets have grown 24% in 4 years. Our own local budgets here have grown 24%. Our spending has gone up 24% in just 4 years when you aggregate 67 and 115. But remember, Milton Friedman, our favorite economist, always said you will never spend someone else's money efficiently as you spend your own. Again, it's a broken model. It's a disincentive. Now, we accept some of those limitations, but when you have COVID going on and budgets are still going up 24%, I'd argue that that's pretty much runaway spending. So again, using Frank's model, because we're talking about darn near $30,000, but when you talk about having 10 kids to go to school for $300,000, or 20 kids in an environment for $600,000, and you kind of go, what would we do with this? Certainly, I think we would agree. If even on the implementation side, we can do a lot better.
What if you choose to send your kid to Woodlands? I'm guessing it's a lot of money, but I don't know if it's 30,000 a lot. Could you just say, you know what, I'd like to opt out of that, and I like to send my kid to Woodlands. That's how the voucher would work. It's like, don't tax me on this, or give me a credit based on when I'm sending my kid to private school.
Well, there's different models in different states, but as you know, Florida, I haven't looked at the actual act that passed, but Florida just put in a statewide voucher system, and it's being incredibly well received. They're saying, hey, we want to give parents a greater role in choosing the educational future for their children. But what I've seen of it leads me to believe that it's basically, if you're shelling this out, it comes as basically like a tax credit.
Yeah, I look at it like, again, to use our same example, like the system like in Illinois, it's like, Stalinism, and the voucher system is kind of like, okay, you got Khrushchev in there, you got some reforms, it's a little bit better. I mean, I think obviously there's a sliding scale between what's optimum and what's real, but I really believe that, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it will be in my lifetime, I hope so, that at some point people will look back at this current model the way we look back on mercantilism. They'll look back and wait a second, you did, this is how you educated kids? I mean, it's a centrally planned system. Now they like to say it's local, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, the way it's structured, I mean, you have the school board and the administration, and they're really in charge of, centrally planning for an entire community. I don't think, I think if, if you gave imagine if you gave these guys, for example, if you banned, like, to use my example again, all grocery stores, and you weren't allowed to have Sunset, or Jewel or any of these systems or grocery stores, and you put a board in charge of it, and you hired administration. I mean, how do you think that would look? It would be a disaster. And then we said, well, we take X amount of money for you. Here's your grocery allotment. If you want to spend even more on top of that, you can go to like one or two private grocery stores in the area. I mean, it's crazy. And I think it's so, a lot of times you talk to this about people and they're kind of like, they kind of get you, but people have such a hard time imagining outside of the system because we've all gone through it, and it's hard to think beyond like our own experience. And you have, like, for example, our school district has a communications department. I mean, you actually have these, I call them like propaganda departments, that their whole job, you've got a team of people that's job is to like put out information to the community in a way that makes the system look great. I mean, they never put out anything negative. You ever notice that? They never come out and say like, yeah, here's our weak area.
Actually, I did see something negative come out from the school district. Jeff, did you see something come out most recently that was a little...
Wow.
Well, are we talking about last Friday? I think if we're talking about last Friday, it's I would say it's the gravest possible thing it could probably be. That really, I think it's a really tribute to the inefficiency and culture that exists in places like 67 and 115.
For the people that know what we're talking about, Jeff, start from.
Sure. Well, Friday morning, an email was sent in the clear, essentially enumerating the parents and families who have children with a 504 plan.
What's a 504 plan?
That's
free lunch?
A learning assistance plan, and where you have children that may need special accommodations. It runs the whole spectrum of things. But basically, it's in the clear. These people weren't BCC'd. I imagine they were intended to be, but in the clear, it named 238. I think it was 238 emails of like, hey, your child with this 504 plan, we're seeking to.
So these are over 200 email addresses of kids that have special needs. And
of the parents, notifying the parents.
Of the parents that have kids with special needs, and they didn't even blind copy. They just CC'd, and I had all the emails in there, right?
Yeah, it was pretty. Well, first of all, it's a violation of a really good law, FERPA, and Family Educational Resource Protection Act outlines that this is confidential information. But again, it's like you're saying, Pete, this is somewhat akin to saying, here are the kids they're getting free lunch. Here are the kids that got these scores on a test. I mean, this really stretches to the most confidential information that really exists within the school system. And it's not about financial data. It's not about parents. It's not about families. It's literally about the students in 67. And so imagine at one fell swoop, you've outed everybody who's got a child that's got a 504 plan. And it wasn't BCC. It was sent completely in the clear. And when this came through, I immediately started calling saying, do you people really realize what you did? Do you understand? You basically, in the clear, you've enumerated all the confidentiality you profess to care about. But that's just the first step. The second step is, the incredibly sensitive nature of these things. You've now exposed children to putting out in the public domain highly sensitive information. You basically named everybody who's in these programs. And a few, 30 some odd minutes later, an email came through, said, "Hey, sorry about this.
Please delete
Please delete the email, and we're sorry about any confusion." Now, think about that. Delete the information. Sorry about any confusion. That was the response to these 200 and some odd parents. And this is what I said. I said, when talking to the district later, I said, it's as if you said, "Hey, sorry, band parents. This was for the chorus parents, but inadvertently was sent to the band parents. So just don't worry about it." And, and it's all done. And without even acknowledging the gravity of what they've done. I mean, we've seen the reaction on the part of these boards and this administration on things from raises and bond referendums. And, you couldn't go into Sheridan or Everett or Cherokee and not trip over a pile of pamphlets about this bond referendum. You couldn't open an email from these other districts that had nothing to do with 115 and not see all these referrals, in references to the bond referendum. We saw
So Jeff, this is external communications. Does this fall under Melissa Oakley?
Well, this actually came out of special services or student services department. It wasn't something that came out of Melissa Oakley, but that was one of my questions too. I'm like, didn't your communications department? I mean, you have a full-time communications department. You have consultants that are being paid by the district. Nobody looked at this stuff before you went out with this confidential information. It just went out in the open. I haven't been able to get an answer on that. But
and the second thing, Jeff, is they're using private email addresses.
Well, it's shocking on a number of levels. But Pete, let me share with you what I think is the worst part.
Okay.
Is as of right now, as of this time right now, 2:56 Tuesday afternoon, they've yet to acknowledge the difficulties and the damages that they've put these families and these children through. They instead have chosen, in my opinion, to sweep it under the rug in every possible way. They've literally sent out correspondence that said, "Hey, we included some emails on something that we shouldn't have." It's not about the emails. It's not about the disclosure. These emails are in the student directory. I can look up the parents' emails of the kid pretty easy. But
it's the qualifying element of it.
But it was an issue that this was exposing highly confidential data that is really a product of one of the most painful decisions you can go through as a parent to determine, hey, what am I going to seek accommodations for my kid or not? And they just literally, and the only word that comes to mind is flippant. It's a flippant response to what a number of people have gone through in a very, very painful personal way, and they refuse to acknowledge the pain they've caused families.
If this happened, if this happened in the corporate world, what would happen to the person that hit that send button?
Well, interestingly, I'm in a financial services business, and I have millions of personal records that include names, addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, credit records, address verifications, employment verifications. Well, it's a violation of a federal act. I don't see how you would not hold somebody accountable to the nth degree. How you would not, publicly come forward in the most honest way and about what happened and what you're going to do to address it. But in my mind, none of those things have happened. They've acknowledged that an email went out that shouldn't have, but unless you actually dug into it, you would think that, somebody just put my email inadvertently on something.
Well, hold on now, because I'm pointing the finger at Melissa Oakley. Pete Jansen says she's like at the top of the chart, right? She's communications.
Well, with external communication, sure, but this came out of
Well, no, what I'm saying is because I believe there was an email that I saw came out that said we're going to make some policy changes that you can't use your private email to send communications. That's at the top, my friends.
Well, listen, there was one of the pieces of correspondence did come out and use the district's messaging service, I think was the term they used. But certainly the implication is the channel that's approved to disseminate information was not the one used. But again, these are the questions I've been firing at the district since Friday. I'm like, what exactly happened and how did it happen? Because, this affects a lot more than those 238 people who were exposed. This has implications for every student in the district. What are these people doing with their kids' information or our information? It's an obvious question.
Yeah, this is something that has to be addressed by the superintendent. I mean, he's the, head of the food chain at the school district and ultimately responsible for, ensuring that these systems are kind of in place or at least holding the people accountable. And so, it's not something, whether it should be the head of the communications department or the head of the special education department. We asked, Dr. Montgomery to just be transparent with the community and tell them what happened and what steps are going to be taken to ensure it doesn't happen again. And, ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to help him and the school district to kind of give them some guidance on here's how this probably should be handled. And here's how, people we've been in touch with want it to be handled. And, it's not to say gotcha, a lot of, what we've done prior to any, releasing any email or communicating with the public is, we've tried to use back channels and make phone calls and send emails out and, get them.
They're never going to respond. They're never going to respond to me. They got what they want out of the vote. That's why I'm pissed. It's a trust thing. He's going to stick around till the next referendum needs to come up in some other county in some other state, and he's bye-bye. But, going forward, what is the supervision? The school board, isn't this like one of the things that they would be? Yeah.
I think this has got to be addressed by the head of the school board, and the superintendent reports to this elected regulatory body. This has got to be addressed by the school board of 67. They have full knowledge of it because I've written them on this.
Yeah.
It's got to be addressed by the head of 67. It's got to be addressed by the superintendent to talk about what controls were in place, what got violated, and how it's not going to happen again. Everybody in the community is in risk. And I can tell you this, Pete, maybe it's because of my role at Parents Care. Maybe it's just because I speak up at meetings sometimes. I've had over a dozen people reach out to me, totally unsolicited, totally unencouraged, reach out to me and said, this is not the first time my child's 504 information or IEP information has been violated. And of course, it's like witnessing a crime. You say, hey, look, you got to report it to administration. And almost to a person, they said, I have, and they haven't done anything. And I'm like, well, that's truly sad, because you can hear the frustration in these parents' voice about look, I'm a victim. My kid's information has been exposed. They've been compromised, but the district just wouldn't do anything about it. And it's a very helpless feeling.
And then people point the finger and say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. This is why conspiracy theories pop up, because you're not transparent. So look, our nature, the way we're wired, is very defensive. Okay. Everything is a threat. And when you don't give us the information, we feel a threat. That's why. So you're going to sweep it underneath the rug. Technology today, everybody's connected. The more that you do this type of stuff, this pendulum swinging the other way, my friends. You can't get away with this stuff. So, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to say, Peter, I would submit to you that this is really, again, about the genesis of Parents Care. We all do better with supervision. We all do better with oversight. In these school districts, it seems to me, given the response that I've seen now from 4 different people within this district now, as of today, and a host of other issues, is I don't want to make this personal on anybody, but it's almost like they feel they've gotten away with everything for so long. You've been on, Pete, we've done the discussions. We're schools, academic achievement in history here. Greatest spending in history, higher admin accounts in history. And in the wake of the bond referendum, what's the first thing to do? Pass raises for the admin. These people have gotten away with everything for so long. I feel there's a perception that anything goes. They literally got to run it out. School's going to be out in a couple of weeks. We're fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not even speaking of malicious intentions. I'm not even saying it's a conscious thing. But the fact is they've got away with this for so long. It's almost beyond.
It's two things. There's no fear of repercussion, so I don't have to be accountable. And number two, there's lethargy on the voting public that only 7,000 people voted to get their taxes raised by $1,000 a year. And I think it starts with what you guys are doing at Parents Care by educating people and overcoming that hump of, oh, you're just negative, you're this and that. No, there's two sides to the coin. The one side of the coin, there is a communications department, there is a propaganda department. And why it's propaganda is there's no incentive for them to tell any negative news.
Sure.
Right.
Or be honest. What's the incentive for them to be?
So, well, it's not that they're lying. They're just not going to talk about it. That's all. So,
well, but I would offer that if we look at the response to this particular incident we're discussing right now, I mean, look, it's clearly an attempt to obscure the true nature of what happened. They have not come out and really addressed a significant security breach and how it happened and what they're going to do about it, and nobody's really accepted accountability for it. The third email said, "I won't make excuses," and I had a conversation with that person this morning and said, "That's all you've done is make excuses to this point." Look, people deserve better. Our community deserves better.
Again, the technology person that's in place, the vetting process that's in place by communications, the superintendent. Hey, to get 105 million, there was a hell of a process in place to get that. There's a lot of things that are going down the line here. I think what I'm guessing, and then Frank, I'll look for your input on this, is do we start with the school board meeting? Does somebody go up to the lectern and do their 3-minute comment on this? We're doing the podcast. What else can we do to make sure that there is some accountability on this? Because somebody needs to leave the system that did this.
Yeah, I think that what's going to happen is probably going to happen in stages, and it's going to be a process over probably years where what we're first trying to do is to change the culture in a positive way. And, how that happens, again, it does, can Parents Care like directly go in and like tell them like, this is what you need to do and this is what no, and that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is also, provide information to the public, guidance, create a layer of accountability, create transparency, and then the public should, do their part and vote in certain ways. And vote. And hopefully you'll see school boards evolve to become more reflective of a more engaged citizenry. And, if you had to look, say maybe 5-6 years down the road, there's been a culture shift, there's been a shift in the school board. Then what comes next is, I like to think that then our job becomes kind of twofold. Is one, to kind of continue to exist as a watchdog organization, because I think as long as you have these, large units of government that are very expensive, you're always going to need a watchdog organization or several. And two, then, is that, we have an opportunity also to come in and to work together as partners. Now, right, initially that's not going to happen. It may not happen for years, but that's kind of, I think, those are kind of two kind of goals we see. And not to say that, Frank McCormick or Jeff Brincat is going to come in and meet with the school board or meet with the superintendent.
They're not going to meet with you guys.
Right. Well, again, down the road, if we get to a point where that can happen, doesn't mean that we're going to do that as individuals, but on behalf of parents, where we can kind of serve as, because a lot of times parents, one, they don't have the time. They may not want to put their face out there, but they may want to come to us and we may be able to bring concerns kind of as like liaisons. So just like, look, you imagine that you have these other organizations out there that, for example, provide accountability for the police force and watch them and meet with them.
I think Frank, you're underestimating the power that you guys have. Are you guys at 14,000 on Facebook? Something like that?
Over 20,000.
20,000. Holy crap. You went up 6,000 since the last time we talked, Jeff?
Well, I'm chalking it up to you, Pete. That's how popular show.
Well, at least people will commit that they like you. Nobody will commit that they like me. The power that you guys have is pressure with a survey, like some of them that you've done. It says, hey, should somebody be accountable for this breach? Yes or no? And then you bring that to the school board and say, look, this is the pressure that we have here. What are you going to do about it? And you keep organizing this, because you had 7,000 vote for the referendum. You got 20,000 that are keeping an eye on you guys. I can't think that there's that many people paying attention that aren't voters. So we just have to stay on this. And hey, communication, people, conspiracy theorists, all that stuff. Why do we have this wasted energy? It's stuff like this. Guys, I'm going to work on getting this thing out as soon as possible. And then see if we get a response from somebody. Jeff, I'll leave it with one last question I have for you.
Sure.
The conspiracy stuff. Now, this is me, and I'm not a conspiracy guy, but all I can do is react to the things that I've seen done to me personally and professionally on the show. In order to get a FOIA, you have to use communications within the system to get the information you're looking for. You can't get it if it's a Gmail, right?
Well, here's the thing: if they use email for business purposes, now you've exposed Gmail to discovery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So email was used for disseminating information. Now that's all discoverable, just like a personal device that somebody had to go from this other email or this other mechanism and stuff like that.
And the reason I'm going there, and this is, I can feel the people rolling their eyes, but isn't this where Clinton had the problem with her own server on the email and didn't use the government server? Didn't this cause all that problems before?
Well, it certainly compromised the ability to secure information that should be secured.
Right? All right. I hate to throw that out there. I know people are going to be pointing at the screen right now, but this is why this stuff happens, and we can't. We have to get to the bottom of it. The private emails doing the communication, that's a big one. And I'm starting with Melissa Oakley, number 1, our superintendent, number 2, and number 3, the president of the school board.
Well, Pete, as you probably remember from prior conversation, I ran a state agency under 2 governors. And this was something we always dealt with in the agency about information security, confidential information. We had all kinds of licensing information, financial information. A lot of stuff was compromising, was certainly highly personal. And I can tell you the standards. Now this is regular government, state of Illinois, business. In this regulatory body, it was highly confidential. It was highly secured. It was highly orchestrated. I can't imagine how you would have this stuff coming out of unrestricted files for just open dissemination. And I can tell you, as a result of all the training I've had over years and years with FOIA, anything now is discoverable. And that's, you don't want to put that burden on people. You have these mechanisms set up to not only ensure information security, and ensure proper employee records retention. You want to make sure that all communications is memorialized, because the FOIA process is something that exists for that reason. These people, for us as taxpayers, as citizens, the business that they're doing is discoverable, and especially, Pete, no matter what, it's because it's our children. It's our children.
That's right.
They decided to create this information breach, not us. And that's why the idea that people in the district were firing back, well, hold on, I didn't create this problem. You did.
Yeah.
You're the one who created these kids. So, look, I hope they'll do the right thing. I have little faith, but I hope they acknowledge the pain, difficulties that they put these families through. Pete, is there a harder decision than these types of things you deal with when your kids, individual education, paths, and to literally treat it in a totally cavalier and flippant way they have? To me, it's shocking.
I don't think they're that smart to be cavalier. I think that it's just been so little oversight that they didn't know any other way to act.
But Pete, think about those raises after the bond referendum. Was that laziness, or was that hubris, or was it just we don't care? I mean, I think it's the same type of thing. You're right. They've had it their own way for so long, and they just figure they can kind of get away with anything, in my mind.
And you know what? They won't talk to you guys. Now that they got their money, they're not going to talk to me anymore. So we have all this wasted energy, and they do stupid things like this. So we'll see what happens, boys. Frank McCormick, Jeff Brincat, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, Parents Care, Lake Forest Podcast School Edition. This breaking news event. Data breach. Do you want to call it data breach, Jeff?
It's exactly what it is.
The Lake Forest Podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Looking for the best pool supplies? Look no further than Dohany's Pool Supplies. With a history dating back to 1967, this family-owned business offers everything families need to keep their pools clean and sparkling, from chemicals to equipment. Plus, customers enjoy free shipping on all orders. Visit Dohany's Pool Supplies today at doheny.com, DOHENY.com, to learn more. Forest Bluff Real Estate Team serves Illinois, Wisconsin, Lake Forest, and Lake Bluff. John Josephitis, Laura Lee Van Fleet, and of course, Michelle Parnell. Get a free market analysis now at forestbluffrealestate.com. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Havey Communications has been helping first responders arrive safely since 1983. It's owned by Lake Forest's own Mike Havey. Check them out at haveycommunications.com. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters: Matt A., Elizabeth C., Costa, Lance, Otto, RDM, John C., and Helen. Shout out to the Lake Forest Breakfast Group, Broad Stop and Captain Mike's in Kenosha, the Greentown Tavern, and the Frolic Lounge in Waukegan.